Welcome back. The news in full. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi delivered his speech at the inaugural session in Tokyo International Conference on African Development (TICAD) held in Yokohama, Japan. During his speech, the head of state expressed his appreciation toward the conference that joined Africa with one of the significant strategic partners. The president explained that TICAD aims at enhancing the development efforts in the African countries since its launching in 1993. He also called on the international and regional fund institutions to take part in funding the development programs in Africa to foster the volume of trade and increase investments. The president stressed the significance of boosting African Union policies for development to establish peace and security. For his part, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe asserted his country's keenness to support the sustainable development and investments in the African continent. Abe also highlighted the efforts exerted by his government to boost the private sector in Africa, as well as cooperating with international funding institutions to eliminate the continent's threats.
Kicking off in the Japanese city of Yokohama on Wednesday, the 7th TICAD gathering reflects President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's non-stop efforts to achieve stability and sustainable development in Africa. Earlier in the day, President el-Sisi held summit talks with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, where they tackled means of enhancing bilateral ties in various aspects. We have more details.
On the sidelines of the TICAD, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi held summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe with the attendance of the delegations of the two countries. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassem Rodi said that Abe praised what Egypt has achieved in the field of development, especially within the framework of the tangible ongoing achievements at the economic reform program as well as the mega national projects. Abe added that this encouraged the Japanese companies to benefit from the investment opportunities provided by these projects, asserting that Japan seeks to foster its bilateral cooperation. Rodi added that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi asserted his keenness to visit Japan to co-chair the 7th TICAD with Abe, aiming at enhancing means of bilateral strategic ties. Rodi said that the meeting tackled means of boosting cooperation between the two countries. The meeting also reviewed means of bolstering bilateral relations in various aspects, as well as a number of regional files with mutual concern. For his part, Abe expressed his country's support for the Egyptian efforts in fighting terrorism and extremism in the Middle East. Also, the political visions of the two countries were agreed upon the significance of approaching political resolutions for the regional crisis. TICAD 7 will focus on economic transformation and improving the business environment through involving the private sector in the process. It will also probe efforts to establish sustainable communities and entrench security and stability in Africa.
Strong and historic. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli headed on Wednesday the cabinet's weekly meeting. During the meeting, the minister discussed a number of political, economic and social files, as well as the implementation of national projects and developing health and education sectors. The ministers reviewed the inclusive health insurance system and the measures of providing basic commodities to low-income brackets.
Hamas said Wednesday that 2 overnight bombings killed 3 police officers in the Gaza Strip in what witnesses call suicide attacks, as the Palestinian enclave was placed under a state of alert. Hamas's Interior Ministry confirmed the 3 deaths, but spoke only of 2 bombings in Gaza City without providing details. Earlier, Israel launched an airstrike against Gaza's Hamas rulers in the Strip.
Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok received Freedom and Change Power candidates list in order to announce the cabinet reshuffle on Wednesday as scheduled. Hamdok said that candidates would be elected according to the previous agreed criteria, taking in consideration the women's fair representation. Hamdok is expected to meet with Freedom and Change Power to discuss the final cabinet reshuffle.
Libya's media center of military operation El Karama, affiliated to the Libyan National Army, said on Wednesday that the military situation is under control. This came after the reconfrontations between the Libyan army and forces of coalition government in southern areas of the capital, Tripoli. A number of opposition were killed during an airstrike launched by the Libyan army forces in a strategic gate between north and west of Libya.
Strong and historical relations dating back to the 19th century make Egyptian-Japanese ties truly significant. When the first Japanese expedition missions came to Egypt in the 1860s, both countries were witnessing major political shifts. Egypt was facing its own challenges, while Japan was aiming at modernizing and implementing open state. Details.
Egypt and Japan have traditionally enjoyed cordial relations. Considering Egypt to be a very important country for the stability of the Middle East, Japan regards these bilateral relations as the axis of its diplomacy in the region. These bilateral relations have steadily developed through increased political, economic, and cultural exchanges between the two countries. On the summit level, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited Egypt in January 2015, and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi visited Japan in February to March 2016. Both leaders declared Japan-Egypt joint statement, which is considered to be the first step of the leap towards a new stage in bilateral relations between the two countries, as both leaders reiterated their willingness to continue to work towards promoting regional and international stability and development, and to further develop their strategic relationship, in particular in the fields of education, electricity, and health, through exchanging of agreements such as Egypt-Japan Education Partnership. Since then, the bilateral relationship between Japan and Egypt witnessed a new leap by enhancing the cooperation on education, human and cultural exchange, as well as on sustainable and comprehensive economic and social development. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said that Egypt looks forward to promoting economic and commercial relations with Japan via promising investment opportunities in the Egyptian market in various sectors. During a meeting with the chairman of the Japan External Trade Organization, el-Sisi reiterated that Egypt is keen on direct interaction with Japanese businessmen to review Egypt's capabilities, including trained labor and the free trade agreements linked with Arab, African, and European countries.
And to shed more light on the importance of TICAD 7, we're joined over the phone by Dr. Sharif Amir, political analyst. Good afternoon, Dr. Amir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, how far does the launching of TICAD 20 years ago has been catalytic for refocusing international attention on Africa's development needs?
Well, as you see, the fact that Egypt is present now in such a summit, it means that there is huge work that will be in place, because we have the presidency of the African Union. So it means that we have to work together with our friends in Japan and all over the world in installing projects, investment in this continent, as we know that there is no other alternative but to rebuild the economies of the African countries inside Africa. The past was very sad for this continent. It was exploited, And I think that now that we have new realities on the ground, the fact that Europe is in an economic decline, that the immigration cannot be accepted anymore there, and also that there are new leadership like the presidency of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who have a new vision for Egypt, new vision for Africa. That all that means that this continent is heading towards development. Of course, we all know that there are so many challenges. This continent is hit by terrorism, is hit by poverty, is hit by tribal factions, and we all know also there is economic decline in several of its countries. So that's why Egypt is a role model, because we started fighting terrorism, we started rebuilding our economy, we are giving excellent results to the world. Investment is coming back to Egypt, is coming back to this land again. So we are giving the example of how to challenge all these difficulties, and through a wise leadership and an open mind towards the cooperation with all the countries of the world, including Japan. All that means that we are working inside or we're heading in the right direction.
Right. Dr. Sharif, how far did the TICAD conferences able to attract investments and create job opportunities in the African continent?
Well, let's talk frankly. There is a huge competition now between Japan and China inside the continent. As I said, Egypt is the example for it. Let's see, for example, the sector of the Suez Canal. We have our friends in China, and President Sisi made several visits to Beijing, and he has excellent relations with the leadership in China, the Premier Jinping, who is internationally known as a strong leader. He has excellent relations with President Sisi, who is a regional leader in the Middle East and Africa. So I think that it depends on the relationship that we have with these countries. Also, we have excellent relations with Shinzo Abe, with the Prime Minister of Japan. So I think that there will be a competition between the countries like China, like Japan, and it will be in the profit of Egypt and all the continents. We have to be very frank. Still, there are some work that should be done in this continent. For example, fighting terrorism in Libya, which is an African country, which is a really oil-rich country. We cannot forget that. So I think that when we start talking with our friends in Japan and in China and giving them our point of view in Egypt, that we have to rebuild these countries so we could have better future for the investment, I think that they will be convinced that they have to pressure some forces on the international arena to back off and let Libya rebuild itself by its national army and fighting terrorism.
Right. Dr. Sharif Amir, Professor of International Relations, many thanks for your valuable insight.